This is a lecture from OpenTuition. To benefit from the lecture, you should download the free lecture notes from opentuition.com.
Now we're going to look at some quantitative techniques. And these are used in strategic management really to try and forecast something about the future, because obviously if you're planning for the future, you need some estimate, if not a guess, but at least some estimate of what might be happening in the future. Maybe about interest rates, exchange rates, employment rates, all sorts of things that can be impactful on strategic planning. The first technique we have is known as the Delphi technique. And it's not, although we've put it under quantitative techniques, it is not necessarily that quantitative. It is dealing with the future, or trying to decide about the future, where maybe it is absolutely not at all clear-cut what might be happening. There could be radically different views. So, for example, at the time of this recording, we are a couple of weeks before in the UK, we're having a referendum on whether or not to stay in the EU. And of course, people would be really interested in knowing, what would happen if the country votes to leave. So what will really happen? The exchange rate, interest rates, employment rates. What might happen? The City of London in terms of banks being based there, and so on. There are lots and lots of potential implications of very fundamental importance to strategic planning. And different people have got different views on this. Some people will say, well, the exchange rate will go way down. Whereas other people will say, yes, sterling has left the EU, but the EU has lost a valuable member of the EU, and the kind of euro is also weakened, so maybe they're not going to change that much, really. Some people will say that employment will rise. Some people say, well, maybe it won't rise because you might not be selling as much to Europe, but you're going to be selling more maybe to other parts of the world. But there's obviously a disparity, a variety of views in what might happen. And we need to try and come down to some consensus. Really, that's what it is, because we can't strategically plan if you've got kind of, completely different views over what's going to happen, other than kind of blindly guessing and picking one at random. So what you do is you define the problem. So let's say, the problem is what will happen, sterling exchange rates, sterling euro exchange rates, and what will happen in employment. Let's say just those two things. And what you do is you pick members with suitable expertise. So presumably there'll be some economists in there. And we have to be careful that in picking members that you get a diversity of views. Otherwise, if you pick a panel which all have the same views, the whole thing's a bit of a waste of time. You really want a diversity of views, because part of the Delphi technique is that views are challenged, and people are kind of asked to reconsider in the light of what other people have said. And you've got a facilitator who kind of looks after the whole process. And then the members of the panel are kept separate. This is not a round table kind of discussion. You're given a questionnaire, and you're asked to fill it in. So it could be things like ranking matters in terms of importance. It could be assigning probabilities to something. It could be making estimates, maybe what the exchange rate goes to, or what the unemployment rate goes to, and so on. You can also have kind of open-ended areas for comments about maybe justifying why you've said something. So this is all done anonymously. Okay. And the questionnaires are then summarized. At least they're anonymous from other panel members. So everyone feels free to express their true opinion. Okay. The questionnaires are collected and the points are summarized. And then the summaries are distributed again to all of the members. So now they see what other people have said, and they see maybe the arguments that other people have used, and you're asked in the light of this again, really to, again, forecast what you think the exchange rates would be and the unemployment rates would be and so on. And again, maybe give your reasons for those decisions. And because it's anonymous, you don't feel embarrassed if you change your mind. One of the problems with the kind of round table discussion is you say something, and if later on you just kind of say that's wrong, there's an element of kind of resistance, maybe, of almost public humiliation to saying, well, I'm actually changing my mind, I've been persuaded. This is all done without that being tainted by kind of changing your mind, even though changing your mind is actually quite a good thing if the evidence points the other way. And then the summaries are taken in again, it's summarized again, they go back again. And the hope is by a number of iterations in this that the consensus is reached, that people's views have converged, they've listened to what other people have said, that they've responded to those arguments and so on. And hopefully these very difficult kind of almost qualitative judgments which are being made, we get a kind of consensus opinion which then might be actually useful for strategic planning. Game theory is a method used when you know that a competitor, say, or some sort of opponent is also trying to win. So it could be two companies wondering what price to sell a product at, wondering what offers to make to the public and so on. You are wary or worried that if I, for example, were not to put a special offer on, not to advertise, and they advertise, then of course they're going to get lots and lots of extra sales. But they'll be doing the same. They will be watching us. So game theory is looking at a number of players, basically, a number of firms, if you like, who are all trying to beat the other ones here, each of whom will make their own specific choices, but the choices made by one player affect the others, and everybody knows that. So you are kind of trying to say, if I did this, what would they do? If they did this, what would I do? And so on, and come out with the best solution. We don't need to look in too much detail at this, but here's the example which is in the notes here. Let's say we're two large companies supplying the market, and at the minute, if they held up prices, they would each make sales of 10 million. Let's say we're company A, and we're thinking, should I hold my price or should I reduce my price? So you just say to yourself, right, if I hold my price, I earn 10. And let's say, first of all, let's say if I hold my price and B holds its price, okay, we'll come on to the next bit later. If I hold my price and B holds its price, I'll make 10 million. If I reduce my price and B holds its price, I'll make 20 million. So I'm definitely better in that scenario reducing my price, because my sales go from 10 million to 20 million. Okay, let's say that B does something different. So we're saying here, what would happen if I were to hold my price and B was to reduce its? Then I'm going to earn 0. Well, what happens if I reduce my price and company B reduces its price? I'm going to get 5 million. So I'm faced here with either getting 0 or 5 million, and again, 5 million is better. The reduction of price option is better. So no matter what company B does, and I've explored the two things it can do, holding its price or reducing its price, no matter what company B does, company A will be better at reducing its price. Similarly, from the other point of view, we just swap over to what B is doing. B sees exactly the same scenario, exactly the same figures there, and B will conclude that no matter what company A does, I will be better at reducing our prices. So they both conclude that the best thing to do is to reduce your price. That is better than gambling, if you like, that both of us hold our prices. That would be best, but of course, if I held my price and B reduced it, I risk getting nothing. And so here we're saying that the best solution for both companies, bearing in mind the actions that the other company might be taking, and bearing in mind the logic that the other company is going through, the best and safest solution here that requires no gambling, this is, if you like, worst case scenarios, but both companies should end up doing this. Logically, they should end up doing this. They should both reduce their prices, and each will end up earning 5 million. Linear regression is a way of trying to predict the future. For example, what will the production cost if I make a certain number of units? What will the sales volume be if I set a particular price, and so on? What number of units will be made if I work a number of hours? It is linear regression. It comes out with a line of the form here, y equals ax plus b, where y is the dependent variable, so cost depends on the volume that you're making there. The hours worked depends on the volume that you're making, and so on there. The volume sold depends on the price. And x is the independent variable, so the number of units sold, will determine the hours worked and the material used, and the selling price will determine the volume sold. And it will come out, you put your figures into a big formula, you won't have to really do that, and you come out with, maybe these are the original figures of cost versus volume, and this will purport to draw the best straight line it can through them. This is the B here, this is the amount you're left with if there's no X in there at all, and then it goes up, increase at rate R, at rate A. Every extra unit made, for example, is increasing the costs by an amount A. By and large, the line it comes out with, they will not all go on through all of the points there. Some will miss, and the more they miss by, then the less reliance you would have on that line. It is only giving a straight line. Okay, so this will not capture some sort of relationship where maybe the costs accelerate as you produce more items because of maybe increasing inefficiency if people are being made to work faster. You need to look at it with a little bit of caution here. You need to test how good the line is. In other words, really, how well do each of these points fit on the line? So if we had points kind of all over the place like this, linear regression will give the best straight line it can through those points, but it may be a fiction, really. And there's really no association between the two variables. So what we need to do is to calculate the coefficient of correlation R, or R squared. So if R squared is low, or R is low, then one variable is not associated well with the other. R can go from -1 all the way through to +1. -1 means there's perfect negative correlation. All the points will be in a line, but as one item increases, the other variable decreases. So as sales price increases, sales volume would decrease in a completely uniform, predictable way. If it was +1, there's perfect positive correlation. As one variable increases, so does the other. So this could be volume produced and cost. If R is 0, then there's essentially no correlation whatsoever. The more points you have, the better. Basically, we're saying if you had only 2 points on the graph, any fool can put a straight line through those. It doesn't really prove anything. But if you can put a straight line almost through 20 points, then you've got quite good evidence that there's some sort of relationship between them. Extrapolating means predicting outside the points you've looked at. So these are the 4 points you've looked at, and you're asked to predict out here. You are in a kind of unexplored territory, really. You don't really know what's going to happen in the line out there, whether it begins to accelerate up like that or to tail off like that. It's relatively dangerous extrapolating without thinking very hard if the relationship is likely to continue. Other known influences such as inflation should be removed. If what we have were volumes in different years here, so these are the volumes going along here, but they've been plotted for different years with different inflationary costs in there, the thing is going to be messed up with inflation. What you should do is to update all the costs to current terms, and then you're left with a relationship which should just depend on volume to get the cost. And finally, remember, even good correlation doesn't prove cause and effect. Both things could move together under a common influence. For example, the common one that's kind of trotted out here, if we look here at ice cream consumption, and if we look at kind of sunburnt injuries, so people staying out in the sun too long, ice cream, you probably get a straight line like that. It doesn't mean that ice cream consumption causes sunburn. It means it's been a sunny day, and that the good weather has increased both ice cream consumption and the incidence of problems with people getting too much sun. Time series analysis is a slightly more sophisticated than linear regression. It says that as something moves through time, it could be sales over the days of a week, it could be sales through the quarters of a year, it could be attendance each month of the year, or the number of people in the shop each month of the year, anything of that varies with time. And we try to find out a trend, an underlying increase or decrease. We're looking for seasonal variations, and seasonal variations, anything with a cycle of less than a year. So looking at the sales in a shop for, say, 6 days a week, that's a seasonal variation. It should repeat itself every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and so on. We try to capture these. You can then have cyclical variations, maybe an economic cycle happening over 12 years or something, pretty slow, and people really don't try and capture that very much for strategic planning. And then random variations, irregular, unpredictable, you can't do much about them anyway. So it's the trend and the seasonal variation that people try to capture. And what we're doing here is that this would be your time, say maybe this is your sales going up here. This wavy line is the actual sales, maybe through the year, different quarters of the year. You can see it's increasing, and the dotted line there is really the trend. An underlying increase or decrease in the variable. And then maybe every spring or something, we have got a good season, and maybe every winter or something, we have a poor season of sales. And the way you predict the future is to kind of extrapolate the trend, and then say, right, when we're out there, what season are we trying to predict? And if you're in the spring season, you say, I'm in the spring season, and therefore I have to kind of add on a favourable kind of seasonal variation. So presumably we're kind of saying that it's going to be going a bit like, if I draw right, a bit like that kind of thing in the future. So rather than just fitting it to a linear curve, this is giving a little bit more detail, and is useful where you have got significant cyclical kind of variations. Finally, there is scenario planning. This takes into account all of the things that could happen and says, right, some of these combinations are inherently unlikely. Because if you have, let's say, 4 variables, so let's say you have good economy and bad economy. Let's say you have one government or another government. Let's say we're in the EU or we're out of the EU. Let's say we have, a high oil price, low oil price. So each of those is up and down. Okay. So each of these has got kind of 2 outcomes there. And if you've got 4 variables, each with 2 outcomes, you've got 16 permutations there. And there's really no point in presenting a strategic planner with 16 possible permutations and get them to come out with 16 possible plans in response to each of those. So what scenario planning does is to try to have a number of believable alternative futures, which are kind of internally consistent. So maybe the two things we're looking at is, let's say the government's going to change in 6 months' time, and we're worried about interest rates in 6 months' time. But we know from what the different parties are saying that if Party 1 got in and formed Government 1, then Party 1 is one that likes spending, has to raise lots of borrowing, government borrowing. Interest rates will go up. Interest rates will not stay at 3% if Party 1 gets in. Government 2 gets in, it's more the government for austerity, if you like, doesn't want to spend lots of money, doesn't want to borrow a lot. It will keep interest rates down. The chance of interest rates going down if Government 1 gets in, Government 2 gets in, is very small. So really what we have are two believable scenarios that we can plan for. We have Government 1 going in, which is going to throw money around and lots of infrastructure and so on, because that's what it promised, but interest rates would go up and we can plan for that on our spreadsheet. Or Government 2 will get in, that's going to be a non-spender, not spending a lot, but interest rates will stay down. We can put those assumptions into our spreadsheet, and we have reduced what had been 4 possibilities down to a much more manageable 2 types of scenario that we can actually plan for. Finally, we just look at what's meant by real options. Not so much a quantitative technique, but something which is in the syllabus you need to know about. So these give basically flexibility when planning the future. And we know the future is not certain. Flexibility is usually worth paying for. And there are 3 types of real option. One is the option to delay or postpone something. So we think we might want to build a factory, but we're not absolutely sure yet. It rather depends on what the economy is going to be doing in 3 years' time, something of that sort. We have a plot of land on which the factory could be built. An option to delay would be, for example, getting planning permission to build the factory now, but not actually doing anything about it, maybe until 3 years' time. And it'd be worth spending money, if you like, to lock ourselves into that planning permission, so that if we wanted to build a factory in a few years' time, we could do it with no bother whatsoever. Or maybe we're not sure whether we want to buy a plot of land, so we go to the owner, and we say we might want to buy this plot of land in 3 years. We're not very sure yet. Would you sell us an option to have the first refusal? So if you're going to be selling a land, you come to us first, and we get the first chance in buying the land. So you're keeping your options open, basically, by delay. Follow-on can come, let's say you are leasing an office, and you lease it for 5 years. It'd be jolly nice if at the end of 5 years you had the right maybe to extend the lease for another 5 years. If you didn't have that right, then you might be faced with having to move out, and all the disruption which that incurs. So when you buy the lease of the office, when you buy into that, you buy the right to be there for 5 years, but you also buy the right, an option to say, well, I want to extend that. That's an option to follow on. Or maybe you put up a factory and you build it in such a way that you can knock out the back wall of the factory and extend it. That's an option to follow on. You've built the basic thing, but we want it to be bigger, better, and because we've spent a little bit more in the design of the factory, then we've left our options open again, that we can easily extend it. And then an option to abandon. Again, a lease is a good example of this. You take on a 5-year lease. What happens, however, if business isn't good? And many leases have what's called break clauses. The lease is 5 years. You can't be kicked out in under 5 years. But after 2 years, you have an option to abandon the lease. And again, this is part of the negotiation. When you are getting into the lease agreement to start with, you might want to pay extra for this option to abandon. So these options allow great flexibility. You have to pay for them, but the flexibility is well worth having because futures are often so uncertain